What's up, fight fans, and welcome back to Minseo MMA, your home for the latest MMA news, fight analysis, and UFC discussions. The UFC has finally started announcing some massive fights. One of the biggest is Khamzat Chimaev versus Sean Strickland, a matchup that many fans have been asking for and one that could become one of the biggest middleweight fights in UFC history. But today isn't about the fights we got. It's about the fights we shouldn't get. There are several rumored matchups and potential booking decisions that sound good on paper but could actually hurt their divisions or prevent even bigger fights from happening. So today, we're looking at the fights the UFC should avoid making and the matchups fans should be pushing for instead. Let's get into it. Don't make Charles Oliveira versus Arman Tsarukyan 2. Let's start with lightweight. A fight that keeps getting mentioned is Charles Oliveira versus Arman Tsarukyan 2. Now don't get me wrong. The first fight was competitive. The rematch would be exciting. But does it really need to happen right now? Not really. The biggest issue is simple. It gets in the way of a much bigger fight. The matchup fans have wanted for over a year is Ilia Topuria versus Arman Tsarukyan. That's the fresh fight. That's the fight we haven't seen. That's the fight that answers the biggest questions at lightweight. If Oliveira beats Tsarukyan, we're likely looking at another title shot against Topuria, a fighter who already knocked him out. And if Tsarukyan wins, we're right back where we started anyway. Instead of running back a rematch, the UFC should prioritize the fresh matchup that everyone wants. The ultimate fight still has to be Topuria versus Makhachev. Of course, there's one fight bigger than Topuria versus Tsarukyan. That's Ilia Topuria versus Islam Makhachev. No matter what weight class, no matter where it happens, this remains one of the biggest fights the UFC can possibly make. You've got arguably the two best pound-for-pound fighters in the world. Elite striking, elite grappling, championship experience, and enormous stakes. Whether it's lightweight, welterweight, or somewhere in between, this is the fight that feels historic. It's the kind of matchup fans will be talking about for years. And until it happens, the debate about who's truly the best fighter in the world won't be settled. Chandler versus Ruffy isn't interesting. Another fight that doesn't generate much excitement is Michael Chandler versus Mauricio Ruffy. Ruffy is one of the most dangerous rising stars in the division. Chandler is a fan favorite. But stylistically, this feels like a mismatch. At this stage of his career, Chandler has taken a lot of damage. Meanwhile, Ruffy continues to improve and looks like one of the most explosive prospects at lightweight. The matchup feels less like a competitive fight and more like a passing of the torch moment. If the UFC wants to maximize Ruffy's potential, there are more interesting options available. What about Conor McGregor versus Mauricio Ruffy? Now that's a fight people would talk about. Conor McGregor versus Mauricio Ruffy would instantly become one of the biggest fights in the sport. It's striker versus striker. Old generation versus new generation. A proven superstar against one of the fastest rising names in the division. The trash talk would be incredible. The build-up would be massive. And unlike the Chandler fight, there's genuine intrigue regarding how the striking battle would unfold. Whether you think McGregor wins or loses, it's simply a much bigger event. Oliveira versus Benoit Saint-Denis makes more sense. If Oliveira isn't fighting Tsarukyan, what should he do next? A matchup against Benoit Saint-Denis makes plenty of sense. Saint-Denis remains one of the most dangerous action fighters in the division. Oliveira continues to be one of the most entertaining fighters in UFC history. Stylistically, it's almost impossible for this fight to be boring. More importantly, it keeps Oliveira active without interfering with the lightweight title picture. That's exactly what the division needs right now. Max Holloway versus Paddy Pimblett. This is another fascinating matchup. For Paddy Pimblett, it's a massive opportunity. For Max Holloway, it's a chance to immediately remind everyone why he's one of the greatest featherweights ever. Pimblett would likely rely heavily on wrestling. Holloway would test him everywhere else. The fight would generate plenty of attention and could headline a major fight night or serve as a high-profile come-on event. Regardless of who wins, it tells us a lot about where both fighters currently stand. Don't rush Islam Makhachev versus Michael Morales. Moving over to welterweight, Michael Morales is one of the hottest prospects in the division. But rushing him into a fight with Islam Makhachev right now may not be the best move. Morales is still building his resume. He's still developing. And another big win would make a future title fight feel even bigger. Sometimes patience creates better matchups. Instead of immediately throwing Morales into the deep end, Giving him one more major test could elevate the eventual fight significantly. Islam Makhachev vs. Kamaru Usman. Now here's a fight that would divide fans. Some would argue Usman is past his prime. Others would say it's still a huge fight. The reality is both things can be true. Usman remains one of the greatest welterweights ever. His wrestling pedigree is elite. His championship experience is unmatched by most active fighters. And stylistically, wrestler versus wrestler creates fascinating questions. Could Makhachev dominate the grappling? Could Usman make things difficult? Could the fight become an unexpected striking battle? The answers alone make the matchup interesting. Islam Makhachev vs. Ian Machado Gary. If we're talking about the toughest current challenge, Ian Gary deserves serious consideration. His movement, his range management, his takedown defense, his fight IQ, all of it creates unique problems. This feels like one of the most competitive fights available at welterweight. And unlike some other contenders, Gary has already proven himself against high-level opposition. If the UFC books this fight, few fans would complain. Don't rush another Merab vs. Petr Yan fight. At bantamweight, the UFC should avoid immediately booking another Merab Dvalishvili vs. Petr Yan fight. The rivalry is great. The fights are competitive. But sometimes divisions need fresh matchups. Instead, why not give fans two elite fights? Merab vs. Umar Nurmagomedov and Petr Yan vs. Sean O'Malley. Both matchups are compelling. Both feel fresh. And both help move the division forward. Running back another Yan-Merab fight right now risks creating unnecessary stagnation. The featherweight division has one clear fight. At featherweight, things are actually simple. Alexander Volkanovski vs. Movsar Evloev. That's the fight. Evloev has earned it. He's undefeated. He's climbed through the rankings. And he's finally positioned himself for a title opportunity. Could the UFC try to fast-track Gene Silva? Maybe. But the division needs to reward merit. Evloev deserves the shot. And from a stylistic perspective, it's a fascinating matchup between one of the greatest featherweights ever and one of the division's most accomplished contenders. Gene Silva vs. Yair Rodriguez is perfect. If Evloev gets the title shot, then Gene Silva vs. Yair Rodriguez becomes the obvious fight. Two exciting strikers. Two dangerous finishers. Two fan favorites. This is exactly the type of matchup that keeps a division moving. The winner becomes impossible to ignore. And the fans get fireworks. That's a win for everyone. Don't rush Dricus du Plessis vs. Nassourdine Imavov. Finally, middleweight. Many fans want Dricus du Plessis vs. Nassourdine Imavov immediately. But there may be a better approach. With Khamzat Chimaev and Sean Strickland already scheduled, it makes sense for Imavov to wait. He's earned his position. He's one of the division's top contenders. And depending on the outcome of Chimaev vs. Strickland, there could be even bigger opportunities waiting for him. Sometimes the smartest move isn't taking another fight. It's waiting for the right one. The UFC has plenty of exciting matchups available right now. But great matchmaking isn't just about making good fights. It's about making the right fights at the right time. Topuria vs. Zarukian. Topuria vs. Makhachev. Volkanovski vs. Evloev. Yan vs. O'Malley. Merab vs. Umar. Those are the kinds of fights that push divisions forward and create lasting storylines. Now we want to hear from you. Which fight do you most want to see next? And which rumored matchup do you think the UFC should avoid? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss the latest MMA content from Minseo MMA. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.